Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the In a Nutshell podcast. This is episode 86. I'm your host, Sean Vowells, and I'm joined alongside Joe Meade. And Joe, we've got a little bit of catching up to do in the Big Ten. We've got the schedule, or not the schedule, the standings over on the left, and our faces over on the right. But Joe, a number of things have happened in the 6 days since we last recorded. But let's start with the events that unfolded Friday night in Bloomington. Indiana, coming off the best win of their season at the Breslin Center, welcomed in Mick Cronin's UCLA Bruins, who were winless in the Eastern time zone, and it was the Bruins who led for most of this one, holding off plenty of Indiana pushes, and the Hoosiers found themselves with a couple of really good shots in the last possession to tie the game, but once again, Indiana comes up short in a close game, and UCLA picks off another impressive victory to get to 10-5. But Joe, we talked about Indiana's big win at Michigan State. They were unable to back it up with something substantial here.
Yeah, Sean, I was really disappointed from Indiana. I mean, I think UCLA was a tough game, but to come out flat the way they did in the first half and really dig themselves a hole. I thought they played well enough in the second half to probably win, but it didn't matter because the hole was there. I thought Tyler Bilodeau had enough presence in the game, and it was a really good balanced effort from UCLA. This was the first time I saw them on the road kind of have the effort, kind of have like without relying too much on an Eric Daly or a Sky Clark, who I thought played exceptional in the first half. So I look at Mick Cronin's team. I think they have a lot of good things going right now. In the I don't think Shaw's going to project this, but to start today, today being Tuesday, the Big Ten title odds were out. So obviously the top four were Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue, Wisconsin. UCLA though, and Maryland snuck in there at like plus 1,200. Kind of shows you they're somewhat in it. It's going to take a miracle. I doubt it happens. The only reason I bring that up, Sean, is UCLA was kind of on the verge of bubble talk about a month ago, and we've talked about their progress since then. We've talked about a lot of the players' progress since then, and even a Lazar Stefanovic kind of being more comfortable shooting the ball and picking his spots better. Only 5 points, but I think that's something we should keep an eye on as the season goes on. But Sean, before I go on too much of a rant here, what were your thoughts on the Bruins and the Hoosiers and the
It
implications?
just never seemed like UCLA lost control of this game. Indiana would fight back. I think they even tied it a couple times, but then UCLA would push the lead back out. Again, the balanced effort, once Indiana turned one thing off, they went somewhere else. And again, UCLA was winning this whole game, and they nearly gave it away. And, Indiana's best three-point shooter had a wide-open look with under 10 seconds to take the lead after missing a layup to tie it just a couple seconds before. So Indiana almost stole this one. They really did. They dropped to 6-9 and 15-11 overall. I don't think we can give them a 0% chance to make the tournament yet, but 4 losses in a row at home have really put Indiana behind the 8 ball. And you look back at all these close losses, Joe, and Indiana certainly played well enough in a bunch of them to win. And had just a couple of them gone the other way, they might be in the field right now.
Yeah, Sean, and obviously I know we haven't published a bracketology yet
Yeah,
this week, but we're certainly going to take questions at the end of this. But Sean, I had nothing else on this game if you didn't.
yeah. And we'll pull up the matrix for, bracketology projections will be coming tomorrow. But we'll pull up the matrix for that part of it. All right, Joe, up next we've got the Wisconsin Badgers, who went on the road to Mackey Arena this weekend and won. Now, they are in action now against Illinois, and they are winning. Again, if you're listening after that game happened, we didn't miss it because it hasn't happened yet for us. But, Joe, this was an impressive one. Pretty close in the first half, but, an offensive explosion from the Badgers, 58 points in the second half, and they pick up a road win against Purdue. Tanji hits the 30-point mark. You've got Klesmit with 17. This was a pretty impressive victory from the Badgers, and it seems like the puzzle pieces have come together a lot more times than they haven't for Wisconsin.
Yeah, Sean, if you remember, we talked about how it was kind of a three-horse race on last week's episode. I think it's still a three-horse race, except Purdue, who was, after Michigan State's LA trip, we kind of saw as the leader of this pack. They're probably completely out of this race now. They're way behind. Wisconsin's kind of been the dark horse for lack of a more unique analogy there. I think Max Klesmit's always been the key there, Sean. I think Blackwell's always going to give you double digits. I think he's always going to give defenses headaches, and he's as efficient as ever when he shoots. But Max Klesmit's someone who could really stretch the floor. Getting to the free throw line too is something he did really well in this game. And to complement John Tachi's 32 with his 17, and keep in mind, Sean, he was 1 of 6 from three. That means he got to the basket, got fouled, and I'm really impressed with him. Really impressed with Jack Janicki too, off the bench. If Wisconsin can play a 7-man or even an 8-man, if a Kamari McGee or a Xavier Amos contributes more, maybe they have something like Michigan State brewing where these guys are fresh. No one was over, aside from Klesmit and Taji, no one was over 30 minutes. I think that's something we should pay attention to down the stretch because it's really done done
There's
wonders for them.
there's just something I'm looking at in the box score here, Joe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Wisconsin was 20 of 22 from two. They were 32 of 52 from the field and 12 of 30 from three. So that leaves
Yep.
20 for 22 from 2-point range, and add that on top of 18 of 24 from the free throw line. That is as efficient as a performance as it gets. Um, Purdue, the issues for Purdue are kind of there, um, and they haven't been able to overcome them recently. The YouTube viewers will see an L3 next to Purdue, and we'll get to why that's a three, Joe. Unless you have anything else to add on this one.
No shot. I really have nothing else. And, Purdue went from one of my hottest teams, a team that a lot of people talked about in Final Four contention, to a team that's really skidding.
And Joe, let's go to the game that made it L3 for Purdue, and that game just went final just before we clicked record. Michigan State at home at the Breslin Center pulls away from Purdue in the second half. Spartans win 75-66. Joe, Michigan State seems to have shaken off the rust from their three losses in 4 game stretch with a huge win against Illinois and this win against Wisconsin. The schedule was tough, but they seem like they're going to be able to win at least enough of these games to stay in the title race for now. But, Joe, they go on the road. They hold Illinois to -2 points over the last 8 minutes. If you're not sure how that's possible, we'll get to it. And then they hold serve at home against Purdue. But, Joe, it seems like Michigan State has put that bad stretch behind them.
Yeah, Sean, and I think they really did it by keeping it simple. They're a great defensive team. Their guards defend really well. They do a really good job of limiting team strengths. I mean, Purdue tonight barely shot. They were not very efficient from three. And another thing I want to give Tom Izzo credit for, even in the Illinois game, they kind of allowed Illinois, for lack of a better term, to walk their own plank. Kept shooting threes, didn't score for the last 9:25. And, I think this is a Michigan State team now, Sean, that a week ago, if I told you this, they're one of the hotter teams in the country, you probably would have called me crazy. But all I'm going to tell you, Sean, is I think MSU, Michigan, there's a reason that's going to be game of the year potential on Friday. And one last thing, Sean. MSU defends the perimeter well as well. I think Braden Smith, he's still probably our Big Ten player of the year. There's a reason he didn't do so well tonight. I don't think it was just that he had an off night. I think MSU game planned perfectly for him. Did they take a little of what Michigan did and Dusty May did? Perhaps, but at the end of the day, Sean, Purdue's got some problems. I think their bench is really exposed. I don't think they get enough depth, and I think Michigan State, a team that could really play 9 guys, kind of exact kind of accentuated that, for lack of a better term. And in a way, Sean, I think this might be good for Purdue down the stretch to find this out now, because this is something against 3 really good teams that's consistently become a problem. It was a problem in the Michigan game, 21-0. Bench outscored. Tonight it was not much better. And when your top guys don't play well, particularly TKR and Braden, that's why you're going to have such a lopsided result like tonight was, especially in the second half.
Yeah, for Purdue first, before I'll get into Michigan State, it's just kind of like this is pretty predictable in if they were to struggle, how would they do it? It's that they're getting virtually no scoring outside the big three, and then one of those big three is having an inefficient day at the office. It's not entirely surprising. They go on the road to Indiana up next, Joe. And if the viewers remember, Indiana gave them everything they could handle at Mackey Arena. Probably deserved to win that game. So Purdue is definitely going to have to turn some things around to avoid L4 next to their name. Matt Painter's called out their toughness publicly. You don't see him do that very often. But I think Purdue's probably like a week or so behind for Michigan State. They are who they are, and they've just got to figure out how to win at this point of the year. We're deep into February. You're not going to do something great now that you haven't been doing well all season. So Purdue, I think they're fine. The title is probably out of reach right now with the way that
Way
the
out of reach.
tiebreakers have. I think I can argue that it's probably out of reach for Wisconsin too, with Michigan being 2 games ahead of them and with the tiebreaker. Not that comes into play for sharing the title, but in terms of Michigan State, Joe, they showed up to play against Illinois. Ben Humrickhouse made a jumper with 8:29 remaining to give them a 65-64 lead. 15-0 Michigan State the rest of the way. They had a goaltend before that was called a bucket and then taken off at the next media timeout, which is why they lost 2 points. But especially after all the discourse from the first Michigan State-Illinois meeting, and Illinois fans were quick to blame the style of whistles that they got as the fact that they lost that one at the Breslin Center. It was a very close game, but certainly a message was sent that Michigan State, heard all that noise, goes on the road, and ends up with a pretty decisive victory.
Yeah, Sean, MSU, clearly the better team than Illinois. I understand Morez Johnson Jr. did get hurt in that game, but that had really nothing to do with it. When you were that pitiful from the 3-point line, and to accentuate it, you hung your Legends jersey the wrong way too. I think that was probably a metaphor for the night, and that's a night, and let's face it, a month of Twitter discourse that Illini fans are probably going to want to forget pretty quickly.
And Joe, we did talk about this before. Illinois is not a good 3-point shooting team. They haven't been for a while. It seemed like for a couple games there that they knew that, and they weren't hunting threes. And then in a game like this, they shoot 33 threes. They go 7 for 33 from 21%. They've cut the rotation pretty significantly. Just 7 players with more than 5 minutes. Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn with 3. Trey White, a DNP coach's decision. So interesting. You'd think if you can't shoot threes and you want better offense, run the tempo, get some fast break points. And it doesn't seem like that strategy has really stuck for Brad Underwood in Illinois. And Joe will keep saying the same thing over and over again. They cannot seem to put more than a couple good games in a row.
Yeah, it's as simple as that, Sean. And I'm not going to keep rehashing it because it seems like we do it every episode.
But it keeps happening.
And to be fair to Illinois, they've been competitive in a decent amount of games. For example, this Wisconsin game, they're only down by 6. Wouldn't shock me if they do make it semi-competitive as we get there. And they've blown really good teams out. This is the strangest team, and probably the team with the biggest spread of where they'll end up in March, and I'm still not going to change that, even if they lose the rest of their games or win the rest of their games.
All right, Joe, let's switch gears to the team that is at the top of the pile. That's your Michigan Wolverines, 12 overall in the AP poll, 12-2 in the conference, 20-5 overall. Joe's an important one for your Wolverines on Sundays. They go on the road and take down Ohio State 86-83. Big game as Ohio State's trying to drag themselves off the bubble, and it was an opportunity for a quad 1A win with Ohio State's analytics being so high, and Michigan gets the job done. Joe, more of the same for Michigan here. They continue to get the job done in close games, and no different here.
Yeah, 6 game in a row where Michigan's won by about 2 or less baskets, 4 points. Dusty May will dispute that based on, some of the threes that happened against Indiana and, whatever. That really doesn't matter to me. This team can win close. Is it a bit concerning that they're not stretching these? I think for some of these away games, it's really not, Sean. people who've watched this conference enough know winning at Assembly Hall is difficult, and winning against a team with an offense like Ohio State's is really difficult. And Ohio State did a lot of things well in this game. I thought Devin Royal played outstanding. I think to get him going for Ohio State could really ensure themselves a tournament berth, even with this 15-11 record they have right now. John Mobley Jr., I really hope that guy goes pro or transfers, which he's probably not going to, because this guy is really good. He hits threes. He really doesn't hesitate to shoot from anywhere. It opens up a lot of opportunities for Ohio State, Ohio State's offense. And I think the biggest thing that was exposed in this game, aside from the bigs dominating for Michigan, was Ohio State's lack of post presence down there. I think the fact that you had Aaron Bradshaw foul out playing less than 12 minutes, that was kind of the end of the game for Ohio State in a way, although it was close. Wolf Golden and even Roddy Gale, the Ohio State transfer who's getting heavily booed. Michigan out rebounded the what out of them, and I think that's the key factor in this game because Ohio State, I thought, shot the ball well. I thought they took mostly good shots, and they did a good job getting it to the paint and driving. The reason Michigan won by 3 is because they had one or two more extra possessions that were the difference, and I think that's something Ohio State's going to have to really examine. I think Northwestern shot is likely a win. Uh, I, Sean, you cut out.
Yeah,
You
you're
hear me?
back. You're back.
Yeah. I think the LA road trip is really key for Ohio State. I think splitting that all but ensures a tournament berth. Especially if they don't drop an unnecessary game at home to Nebraska or that Northwestern game that we talked about. Because I think 17-18 is probably the magic number for the Buckeyes, and I don't think the way they played was that concerning. It's just more an issue that could be really really expanded upon by other teams should they have the strength to do it. So I think a really good performance from Michigan. I think Ohio State, just a few things that need to get tweaked up so they could be a instant tournament team. But overall, business as usual for the Wolverines. And evidently, Sean, they got a humongous game on Friday. Probably their biggest game since the 2022 Sweet 16 against Villanova.
When it comes to playing against Michigan, you do need some depth across the front line just to play with Wolf and Golden. And teams have been trying to turn Wolf into a forward more than a guard. And don't really think Ohio State did that enough here. You have Danny Wolf with 17, 11, and 5. Like, that's just a really good game. And, if Dusty wants to have Danny Wolf be the primary creator because there's no point guard on this team. So I think if you can make him more of a forward, I think that might be the way to go against this Michigan team. While he still probably will make a couple tough twos around the basket, it's much better than him, spraying it to a wide open 3-point shooter or taking a 3 himself. But yeah, Joe, that one is important. Probably will decide the title, in all honesty, Friday night at the Chrysler Center when Tom Izzo and his Michigan State Spartans go on the road to play Dusty May, 8 o'clock Eastern on Fox. Sure, Gus will be on the game for that one, so it should be a good one, and you know what he means to the state of Michigan. So that could be it. That could be it for the league. If Michigan State wins, they will take the lead,
Like half a game, yeah.
half a game temporarily, and then if Michigan wins, you go a game and a half up. And again, they do play on the last day of the season, so maybe it's not the title decider, but certainly will skew the odds heavily in one team's favor. All right, Joe, we got a couple other things to clean up from last week. We had a pretty big game on Thursday. Maryland went on the road and beat Nebraska, 2 tournament teams going at it. Maryland continuing to impress this year at 10-5 in the league. Nebraska, a really good chance for a big win to try and pull away from the bubble They're probably in the 9 to 10 range as of now. But a pretty good first half for Maryland was enough for them to hold serve the rest of the way, and Kevin Willard and his Terps get a huge road win here on last Thursday.
Yeah, I think finally Maryland's getting the respect they deserve nationally, and it's not something that's been a secret in this conference. Even last year's Maryland somewhat underperformed, and I gave them a pass for that because of the great year one they had with Kevin Willard. Derek Queen, people always talk about Cooper Flagg, and they could talk about a lot of these other freshmen, even a Jace Richardson within this own conference. But if Derek Queen isn't freshman of the year, or like someone doesn't like average 30, that's a freshman, I'd be pretty remiss.
It's an interesting race this year because
Yeah,
last year, it was split between Owen Freeman and Mackenzie Mbako, and they were solid players, but last year's them would not be on the first team this year with the Illinois, Yakashonis with Queen, there's plenty to go around. But yeah, I mean, I think Queen probably gets the Big Ten Freshman of the Year. In terms of national, it's probably Cooper Flagg, but still a lot could happen here down the stretch.
yeah, and the fact he could be a centerpiece and Julian Reese, who's often been a centerpiece, could be a compliment is probably the best thing Maryland could have going. And they're extremely efficient as always, Sean. One of the best field goal percentage teams in the country to this day. Jacoby Gillespie and Rodney Rice as well. It's a very hard starting five to contain. One criticism I could have is I'm not sold by their bench quite yet, especially in this game against Nebraska. Getting 0 points for the bench. That's burned Purdue. I don't know if it's going to necessarily burn Maryland down the stretch. I think they're really well equipped, and I think they have more offensive threats, quite frankly, than a Purdue. So perhaps that gets them across the finish line, meeting a top 4 seed and a double bye in the Big Ten tournament. And to be quite frank, Sean, the remaining schedule, they have 3 really easy games to me, and then 2 really hard games. I'd like to see them go 4-1. To be quite honest with you, I think.
Yeah, can they beat one of the Michigan schools?
Yes, that's what's ultimately going to come down to. You play USC at home, a team that's really not played too well on the East Coast, aside from an Illinois game. At Penn State in last, and Northwestern, who's probably not headed for the Big Ten tournament, I should say. So if I'm Maryland, I'm really looking to finish on a really strong note, and I think upsetting one of Michigan State or Michigan could do wonders for them. But I know what people are saying on the net, that's not necessarily much of an upset. So really, who knows, Sean? I think Maryland's one of the more interesting teams that if you're just tuning into this podcast or into the Big Ten, that you should keep an eye on for your bracket.
It seems like there are a couple of teams in this league that are built with 2 bigs. Certainly Michigan State, Indiana. Maryland is built with 2 bigs, but I think it's a little bit of a different way. Derek Queen is extremely quick and fast, and he can shoot a 3, but he can create for himself off the bounce. And then they're surrounded with 3 guards who all put up 5 3-point shot attempts in this game. So that to me, and I think I've said this before, but that just seems like the right way to approach 2 bigs in modern basketball. And, we saw Purdue basically, don't play Will Berg anymore because they weren't able to figure it out. Indiana really only has success when one of their 2 bigs is on the bench. Michigan has success in 2 bigs because one of their bigs is actually the point guard. And then Michigan State has really not seen offensive success with 2 bigs. They are pretty good defensively, but it seems like the Maryland's way of playing 2 bigs is different than the rest of the Big Ten and probably different than the rest of the country.
Yeah, Sean, and again, another factor teams really should pay attention to and fans too. As I think Kevin Willard, I think he's kind of not a dark horse necessarily for Big Ten Coach of the Year. It's probably likely going to Dusty May at this stage, but if I were to have a returning Coaches of the Year thing, which seems stupid, he's probably it, to be completely honest. It would be between either him or a Fred Hoiberg.
So both of these teams did hold serve in their next game. Nebraska went on the road and beat, a depleted Northwestern team, which, Nick Martinelli is still playing at a pretty high level and probably earning himself a first-team all-conference bid at this point. But without Barnheiser and Leach, it's going to be really tough for Northwestern to win games. So Nebraska bounces back there. They get Penn State next, so another opportunity for a victory. And then they also play Minnesota and Iowa before the Big Ten tournament. So for Nebraska, there's a chance that they can. They're at 7-8 in the league right now. A chance to get to 10 wins, maybe even 11, and cement themselves in the tournament. And Maryland also backed up this one with a 26-point win at home against Iowa. So, Joe, there's not much. These aren't huge wins. These are wins against teams that are not in the tournament, but it's one in the W column, and both teams took care of business.
Yeah, Sean, and this is kind of a theme that's going to happen down the stretch. I think it parlays us into our last segment, which, if you want to start it after my little ramble here, teams like Ohio State and to a degree can't afford to lose some of these like gimme games. Now, Maryland probably could have afforded it because they're kind of in the purgatory position where they're somewhat in the Big Ten title race and somewhat playing for and really playing for a double bye. But it's more these bubble teams where these home games where you're favored in are really going to matter for you. So get wins where you can get them, especially now because the days dwindle. Whether that's someone in the title hunt, someone in the double bye hunt, or someone just hunting to get into the NCAA tournament.
All right, Joe, we've got the bracket matrix up here. For those who can't see, it's not coming through all that great. Not sure why it's doing that. Let me try this again, but we'll take a look at a couple of Big Ten teams on here and how we think that they will do. And yeah, it's not coming through very well, so I'll try this again. But I will just read them off to them first, and then we'll try and load it back in. Purdue still on the 2 line per the matrix. Now there's a couple of predictions that are a couple days old here, and of course none that were done after the Purdue game today. A couple ones late here have them as a 3. So I would think Purdue's probably on the 3 line right now. We've got Wisconsin as the first 3 seed. Their game today could depend on whether they jump up and take that Purdue spot or not. We've got Michigan as the top 4 seed. Michigan State as the final 4 seed. And then 3 Big Ten teams on the 5 line, Maryland, UCLA, Illinois. The title race might be over for the Terps, Joe, but certainly a double bye and a protected seed still up for grabs. And I'm sorry, those are all 6 seeds, not 5 seeds. Maryland, UCLA, Illinois. Then we've got Oregon down on the 8 line despite all their quad 1 wins. They've really kind of fallen off recently. Nebraska as the final 9 seed. Ohio State as the first 10 seed. And then after that, we've got Indiana probably in the 5th to 8th team out range. So a lot to digest there. But, Joe, any comments on that bracketology?
Yeah, just one comment. Illinois is kind of treading water right now, and same to a degree with Purdue. You could really see what a February stretch, although the committee and the bracket matrix takes into account the whole body of work. 3-4 game stretches where you're not playing well and losing really comes back to bite you. And I think it could be an example of that if we check this next weekend. Purdue's streak goes from L3 to L4, and Illinois goes the same way.
Okay, so we've got. Do we have a couple of questions or?
Yes.
Okay. Well, why don't we go with those?
Yeah. So I'll fire it up. First one from Frankie, avid question asker. Thank you. And Frankie, a big time Sparty, so I'm sure he will be watching or at the game on Friday. So hopefully a bad night for Frankie, being the Michigan Wolverine fan I am. Frankie asked Sean, is there any way Michigan State can play themselves back on the 2-3 line? They were consistently here during this 13-game winning streak. However, they fell off following the LA trip and Indiana loss. And he asked this before the Purdue game. So I'm going to go with a yes, but I'm going to let Sean explain further.
Yeah, 2 might be a lot. There's just a lot of SEC teams up there, as the viewers can see. Certainly a 3 is definitely possible, and you can see the last couple of projections there on the screen. Almost all of them are 4, maybe 1 or 2 5s in there. And, of course, that's not, taking into account the victory against the 8 overall seed tonight in Purdue. So I think 3 is certainly possible. And, hey, if they don't lose the rest of the way, they're probably on the 2 line. But it is, more of a prediction thing than anything. And it's hard to see them basically winning out.
Absolutely. This one, boy, is this good. This is from Brian. I assume yep, definitely a Purdue fan, just based on the bio and tweets. Brian asked Sean, and this is a fresh DM, so I'm gonna scroll through the angry messages here. Is there a way Purdue placed themselves, and that's said nicely, out of a protected seed here? They have a tough game at Indiana coming up. They also do finish at Illinois, who has been struggling, although I do not believe in my team at all. And again, there's a lot of French I sorted through there, and I could understand the anger. But Sean, what's your answer to
I
that?
mean, it would take a lot, right? They only have 4 games left. Um, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, they are 19-8. Again, you'd think, worst case scenario, they're 21-10 going into the Big Ten tournament. I mean, I don't see it unless they lose the rest of their regular season games. Probably not. But again, the SEC teams in there, like the Kentuckys and the Missouris and the Ole Misses, they're losing pretty much half of their games. You've got the Big 12 teams in there who are also beating up on each other. So, no, I don't see them falling down worse than a 4. And I don't think they'll go to 4 losses in a row either. But, no, I don't see them dropping off the protected line. And the way that some of these mid-majors are, you want to get on that 4 line if you can.
This one from Gabe, an Ohio State fan. Yes, we don't get a lot of these, especially for basketball. Gabe asked Sean if Chalk holds. He assumes Ohio State goes 2-3 in their remaining games. So I'm assuming he's going to say they beat Northwestern and Nebraska at home, lose at IU, and go 0-4-2 on the LA road trip. Is 2 wins, meaning a 17-14 regular season, good enough for Ohio State to stay out of Dayton and I think he just means get into the tournament in general.
Probably. They're 28. They're routinely in the top 30 in the various metrics. 20th in Ken Palm right now. Um, I've been saying this before, Joe. It might come down to their win and loss record, really. 3 is the magic number. There is no rule that says that that's the rule, but they haven't gone any closer to 500 than that. And they have the good wins. They have the numbers. Unless they were to get blown out and they were to get down into the high 30s, maybe even 40s, I think that's probably fine.
John, is it safe to sum it up and say, Sean, sorry, cut out.
You're
Sean,
back.
would it be fair to say then just don't lose your one of your remaining home games? What are your two?
Yeah, I would say that's probably. I would say that's probably okay. You already lost to Indiana at home, so beating them could perhaps erase that home loss.
Mhm.
But no, I think they're probably headed for Dayton in that scenario. With the teams that have been decent have the good wins. With a poor or worse home win loss record, usually do get thrown in there. Ohio State's a huge brand. Dayton's pretty close to Columbus, so I would say that there's a pretty high possibility that Ohio State is one of the 4 teams in Dayton if the scenario plays out like we've been saying.
Excellent. Sean, one last question from our friend Mark. Mark is a big MSU fan, but an avid follower of college basketball. Mark asked, Sean and Joe, what are your predictions for the 2 big rivalry games this weekend? Um, I think for Michigan State, I'm going to roll with MSU by 3. I just think this is a team that's been against the wall plenty of times, especially recently in January and February, and most recently after their loss at home to Indiana. This gives me vibes of 2019. I think they defend so well. I think they're going to turn one of Trey Donaldson or Danny Wolf over enough times to give them a few extra possessions. And more importantly, I think Michigan State, where they're most lethal, is when they have 6 to 9 point leads with 7 minutes left. If they do have that, I give them a 90% chance of winning. So I think Izzo does get the first of the Izzo versus May battles, and I think they make this title race really interesting because I think if MSU does win, Sean, it gives teams like a Wisconsin hope, and even teams like Maryland, perhaps Purdue, re-enters the ring. Really, who knows? But I think this title race is not going to necessarily uh, be over on Friday, which means Michigan State's going to win.
I I disagree. I'm going with your Wolverines, Joe. I think Michigan State is not good enough to put this thing away, like on the road at Michigan. I don't think they're scoring at a clip. Like they're not making a ton of threes, and that's how you have to beat this Michigan team. You have to put them away. And I think Michigan drags this thing into another one of these close battles. You got to give the edge to Dusty May and the Wolverines right now. Michigan State don't really have a go-to guy. It should be Jace Richardson. I feel like everybody can agree upon that, except for the coaches over on the sideline for the Spartans. But again, I'm giving Michigan the slight edge right now, and we'll see what happens from there. Joe, the other quick before we get to the other rivalry game, Duke is playing Illinois at MSG. That's a great chance for Illinois to turn this thing around, or to put themselves back into the protected seed conversation with Duke, who's the number 2 overall team, pretty consensus right now. And an interesting one. You don't see Big Ten teams play in these games very much. There are, other conferences that sometimes do this in the middle of conference play, but not Duke and Illinois. But if you got anything to add on that one before we get into the IU Purdue.
No, I just don't see it, Sean.
Yeah, I
be
think
our
Duke will
this
win
will be
pretty handily.
after the mark question. We'll have our typical like what upset do you pick. It definitely won't be that one.
Yeah.
So we can move on to IU Purdue. I guess I could start, Sean. I think Indiana finds a bleeping way to do it. I think this is Mike Woodson's last rivalry showdown with Purdue. He's been very successful against them, especially performance wise. Take out the result. I think performance wise they've played really well. And if the last one wasn't evidence enough, I would not know what to tell you. I do think they know this is kind of their last stand in a way to get back to the tournament. If they lose this, I don't see any way unless they win a few games in Indianapolis, which is always possible. But I do think they're going to have to ride the crowd. I think you could not ask for a better situation for Purdue to be this cold and have this much of an identity crisis, particularly on the bench. I think this is a game someone's going to have to step up, whether it's Umar Ballo, Miles Rice, Malik Renew. Someone has to be the hero in a way. So I think the Hoosiers find a way and kind of give the Big Ten a real bubble team to follow for the rest of this season.
I think Purdue gets this one done, Joe. Again, they're teams that really need a win. Playing against Indiana hasn't been good for the Hoosiers over the years. I believe Mike Woodson and his team will roll into this game trying to do the exact same thing that they did at Mackey Arena, in which they thought that they deserved to win that game. Now, that would basically put the ball in Matt Painter's hands to see what kind of adjustments he could make to make sure that that didn't happen again, because they were outplayed in that game. And it was very easy for the Hoosier bigs down low. It was very easy for the guards to get to the hoop. Not sure if they played any zone against Michigan State tonight. I'm assuming they didn't. We could potentially see that against Indiana. But my pick is going to be trusting Matt Painter to make the appropriate adjustments from a game that they were outplayed in. And, Indiana's lost 4 in a row at home. And this would certainly end any of the at-large talks. But, Joe, if they win this and the right teams around the bubble lose, they might be in the field next week. So, Indiana certainly played well enough. It's been a while, Joe, since they were thoroughly outplayed. And the Wisconsin game wasn't exactly close, but I wouldn't say they were dominated. But they were outplayed there. But, this is a 7 or 8 game stretch here where they haven't won a lot of games, but they played pretty solidly in most of them. So can they get themselves across the line at home in what will be Mike Woodson's last game in this rivalry? He is 3-4 against Purdue as coach. And, if he goes 4-4, the tenure will be looked at a little bit differently in a couple of years. But I just think Painter gets the job done with some adjustments, and Purdue gets back on track, and Indiana will be forced to get the AQ instead of an at-large.
Absolutely. Sean, one last question. We do this a lot. We've been doing this a lot in years past. We're just gonna keep on doing it. So, Sean, in the next 3 days, so let's call it Thursday through Sunday, pick one potential upset you see. I could start off. Uh, I think Ohio State goes into Pauley Pavilion and beats UCLA.
Yep, I think
I
that'll
think
happen
Ohio
too.
State's in need of not necessarily a desperation win, but in need of one more win to really stamp their resume. And I think they do get it on Sunday on CBS. I don't think the timeline is going to be too big. And this is a team that's played really well on the road. They've won at Purdue. They should have won at Wisconsin. And they've sweated out a lot of close games. For as many as they've lost, Sean, I think they've learned enough lessons. And I think Jake Diebler and this crew really are going to get it done on Sunday in LA.
Yep, I agree. I think that UCLA's lack of a superstar kind of plays right into Ohio State's hands. When they've lost games, I think they've been outplayed by one player most of the time, or at least a couple players. I think Ohio State's going to win that game too. In terms of another upset, Joe, I mean, a couple of these games might be near even. You've got a battle of the really four teams playing that probably feel like they have to win to keep their Big Ten tournament hopes alive. Iowa hosting Washington, certainly the loser of that one would be in a bad spot. And Penn State visiting Minnesota. I guess it'll be an upset, Joe, but I'm going to go with Penn State over the Golden Gophers. Penn State 3-12 in the league. What was a pretty promising start has gone downhill quick, and maybe they've just got a little bit of fight left in them to sneak that 15 seed. So remember, as you're looking in the standings, 10 through 15 will play the first day on Wednesday. It's another game from previous years. 16, 17, and 18 will be going home early, and then 5 through 10 will be playing on Thursday, and then 1 through 4 will be on Friday with the winners from the previous day's games. So less than a month away until conference tournaments, and less than a month away from Selection Sunday. So thank you, everybody, for tuning into this episode of the In a Nutshell podcast. We've got a ton of videos coming out soon, and we'll see you next time.